Arab billionaire CEO ripped black waitress's shirt. Her tattoo stunned everyone in the restaurant. The crystal chandelier at the Golden Palm restaurant sparkled like diamonds hanging from heaven. Every table had white silk cloth that cost more than most people made in a week. The air smelled like expensive perfume mixed with fresh roses and grilled lobster. This was where millionaires came to eat lunch and billionaires came to make deals that changed the world. On this particular Friday evening, something happened that nobody would ever forget. Something that started with violence but ended with justice. Something that proved even the richest man in the room could fall when faced with the truth. The story begins with a torn shirt, a hidden tattoo, and a waitress who was much more than she appeared to be. This is the story of how an Arab billionaire CEO ripped a black waitress's shirt and how her tattoo stunned everyone in the restaurant. But more than that, this is a story about patience, courage, and how sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one pretending to be powerless. Olea Thompson had been working at the Golden Palm for exactly 7 months and 3 days. She knew this because she marked every single day in a small notebook she kept hidden in her locker. To everyone who saw her, she was just another waitress trying to make ends meet in an expensive city. She wore the same black uniform every night, tied her hair back in the same neat bun, and smiled the same polite smile even when customers treated her like she was invisible. But Olea Thompson had a secret that nobody knew. She wasn't really a waitress at all. She was Special Agent Olea Thompson from the Financial Crimes Division of the FBI, and she had been undercover for 7 long months, watching one particular customer. That customer was Rashid al-Rashid, a billionaire from Saudi Arabia, who owned half the oil companies in the Middle East and had his hands in businesses all over the world. To the public, Rashid was a genius businessman who had built an empire from nothing. He gave speeches at universities about success and hard work. He donated millions to charities and had his picture taken with presidents and kings. But Olea knew the truth about Rashid al-Rashid. She knew about the money he stole from poor countries by bribing their leaders. She knew about the workers in his factories who were treated like slaves and paid almost nothing. She knew about the billions of dollars he had hidden in secret bank accounts to avoid paying taxes. And she had spent 7 months gathering evidence to prove it all. Every Friday night, Rashid came to the Golden Palm with his business partners. He always sat at the same table in the VIP section, table number 7, which had the best view of the city skyline. He always ordered the same thing: grilled salmon with asparagus and a bottle of wine that cost $3,000. And he always treated the waitstaff like they were dirt beneath his expensive Italian shoes. Olea had been assigned to his table from her first week, and she had endured things that would have made most people quit on the spot. He called her names that made her skin crawl. He made comments about her body in Arabic, thinking she couldn't understand him. What he didn't know was that Olea spoke 5 languages fluently, including Arabic, and she understood every disgusting word that came out of his mouth. She wrote them all down in her evidence files. He would snap his fingers at her like she was a dog. He would accidentally touch her when she served his food. He would laugh with his friends about how black women were only good for certain things that made Olea's stomach turn with disgust. But she never reacted. She never showed anger. She just smiled, served the food, and recorded everything with a tiny microphone hidden in her earring. Because Olea Thompson wasn't just gathering evidence about financial crimes, she was documenting everything, building a case so strong that not even Rashid's army of expensive lawyers could save him. The FBI had been trying to catch Rashid al-Rashid for 5 years. Every time they got close, witnesses would disappear or suddenly change their stories. Every time they found evidence, it would mysteriously vanish or be destroyed in convenient accidents. Rashid had people everywhere, in banks, in government, offices, even in law enforcement. He thought he was untouchable. He thought his money could buy him anything and anyone. That's why the FBI decided to try something different. They needed someone on the inside, someone Rashid would never suspect. They needed someone who could get close to him without raising any alarms. When Aliyah volunteered for the mission, her supervisors thought she was crazy. She was one of their best agents, with a law degree from Harvard and 10 years of experience taking down white-collar criminals. Why would she want to pretend to be a waitress and suffer through months of abuse? But Aliyah had her reasons. Her father had been a small business owner who lost everything when a corrupt billionaire like Rashid had destroyed his company with illegal tactics. Her father had died of a heart attack 2 years later, broken and defeated. This mission wasn't just about justice for Aliyah, it was personal. So she created a fake identity, complete with a fake work history and fake references. She applied for the waitress job at the Golden Palm and got it easily, because they were always looking for pretty faces to serve their rich customers. And for 7 months, she had played her role perfectly, never breaking character, never showing who she really was. Aliyah had a tattoo on her back that nobody at the restaurant had ever seen. It was large, covering most of her upper back, and it wasn't just any tattoo. It was the official seal of the FBI Financial Crimes Division, surrounded by her badge number, her real name, and the Latin phrase, Fiat Justitia Ruat Caelum, which meant, let justice be done though the heavens fall. She had gotten it after her first big case, when she had taken down a corrupt senator who had been stealing money meant for children's hospitals. The tattoo was her reminder of why she did this job, why she endured the long hours and dangerous situations. It was hidden under her uniform every night, a secret identity waiting to be revealed at the perfect moment. That moment came on a Friday night in December, exactly 7 months and 3 days after Aliyah had started working at the Golden Palm. Rashid was in a particularly bad mood that night. One of his illegal deals had fallen through, though he didn't know that Aliyah was the one who had tipped off the authorities about it. He had been drinking more than usual, and his behavior toward the staff was even worse than normal. When Aliyah brought his food to the table, he complained that it was cold, even though steam was still rising from the plate. When she offered to take it back to the kitchen, he stood up suddenly, his face red with anger and alcohol. "You stupid woman," Rashid shouted, his voice echoing through the restaurant. "You can't do anything right. You're worthless, just like all of your kind." The entire restaurant went silent. Every conversation stopped. Every fork paused midway to someone's mouth. All eyes turned to table 7, where Rashid stood towering over Aliyah, his hands clenched into fists. Aliyah remained calm, her training keeping her steady even as her heart raced. "I apologize, sir. Let me get you a fresh plate right away." But Rashid wasn't done. 7 months of treating her like she was less than human had given him a sense of power over her. He thought he owned her, thought he could do anything to her without consequences. That was his biggest mistake. "You think you're better than me," he snarled, stepping closer to her. "You think you can disrespect me? Do you know who I am? I could buy and sell you 1,000 times over. You're nothing but a pretty face in a cheap uniform, and you'll always be nothing." Then, In a moment of pure rage and arrogance, Rashid reached out and grabbed the collar of Olia's shirt. With one violent motion, he ripped it down the back, tearing the fabric from collar to waist. The sound of tearing cloth echoed through the silent restaurant like a gunshot. Alia stood perfectly still as her shirt fell away, revealing her back to everyone in the restaurant. Gasps filled the air, but not because of the violence they had just witnessed. They gasped because of what they saw on her skin. The tattoo was impossible to miss. Bold black ink against her brown skin, professional and official looking. The FBI seal was perfectly clear, with the eagle and the shield and the stars. Around it were her credentials, her badge number, her real name, Special Agent Olia Thompson. The Latin phrase curved along the bottom, and above it all were the words Financial Crimes Division in bold letters. For several seconds, nobody moved, nobody breathed. It was as if time had frozen in that exact moment. Rashid's face went from red with anger to white with shock. His hand was still holding the torn piece of fabric, but his fingers had gone limp. His eyes were wide, staring at the tattoo like it was a snake about to strike. The other diners, many of whom were wealthy business people who probably had their own secrets to hide, looked terrified. Some of them slowly reached for their phones, then thought better of it. Others started backing away from their tables, as if distance could protect them from what was about to happen. Alia turned around slowly, with the same calm grace she had shown for 7 months. She looked Rashid directly in the eyes, and for the first time since she had started this mission, she didn't smile. Her voice was different too. Gone was the soft, submissive tone she had used as a waitress. Now she spoke with the authority of a federal agent who had just caught her target red-handed. "Mr. Al-Rashid," she said, her voice carrying across the silent restaurant, "I believe we need to have a conversation." Rashid tried to speak, but no words came out. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Behind him, his business partners were already getting up from the table, trying to leave without being noticed. But Olia raised her hand slightly, and suddenly the restaurant's exits were blocked by people in dark suits who definitely weren't waiters. They had been there all along, other agents posing as customers, waiting for this exact moment. "Sit down, gentlemen," Olia said to Rashid's partners. "You're all going to want to hear this." She pulled a small device from her pocket, what looked like a regular pen but was actually a recording device. She clicked it, and suddenly Rashid's voice filled the restaurant, coming from speakers that had been secretly installed weeks ago. It was a conversation from last month, where Rashid openly discussed bribing a senator, hiding $20 million in offshore accounts, and arranging for a witness against him to have an accident. The recording played for 3 minutes, each word another nail in Rashid's coffin. The other diners looked shocked, some of them recognizing their own voices in the background of the recording, discussing their own illegal dealings. When the recording ended, Olia spoke again. 7 months, she said, looking at Rashid. For 7 months, I've served you food while you talked about destroying people's lives. I've smiled while you called me names that would make decent people sick. I've cleaned up after you while you bragged about stealing billions from people who needed it. Every word you said, every crime you confessed to thinking you were safe, I recorded it all. Rashid finally found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. You can't do this. I have rights. I have lawyers. You have. Nothing, Olia interrupted. Your lawyers are being arrested as we speak for helping you commit these crimes. Your bank accounts have been frozen by federal order. Your passport has been revoked. And that witness you thought you had killed, he's alive and in protective custody, ready to testify against you." The color drained from Rashid's face completely. He looked like he might faint. His legs were shaking, and he had to grab the table to stay upright. One of the other agents stepped forward, pulling out handcuffs. "Rashid al-Rashid, you're under arrest for money laundering, tax evasion, bribery of government officials, conspiracy to commit murder and violation of international financial laws." As they read him his rights, Rashid looked at Olia with a mixture of shock and rage. "You planned this," he said. "You planned everything. The spilled wine last week that ruined my documents, the computer virus that destroyed my files, the deal that fell through today. It was all you." Olia nodded. "Every bit of it, every move you made, I was 3 steps ahead. Every crime you committed, I documented. Every person you hurt, I recorded. You thought you were untouchable because of your money and power, but you forgot something important. Justice doesn't care how rich you are." As the agents led Rashid away in handcuffs, the restaurant erupted in whispers and shocked conversations. Some people were calling their lawyers, others were deleting things from their phones. A few were actually applauding, apparently happy to see Rashid finally face consequences for his actions. The manager of the Golden Palm approached Aaliyah carefully, looking stunned. "You, ... you're really FBI?" he asked. Aaliyah nodded. "I'm sorry for the deception, but it was necessary. Your restaurant isn't in any trouble, as long as you weren't aware of the criminal activities taking place here." The manager shook his head quickly. "We had no idea. We just thought he was another rich customer." As Aaliyah gathered her things, preparing to leave and file her final report, several of the other waitresses approached her. They were young women who had also suffered abuse from customers like Rashid, who had been treated as less than human because of their job. "Thank you," one of them said, tears in her eyes. "He's not the only one who treats us like that, but seeing him get arrested, maybe things will change now." Olia put her hand on the young woman's shoulder. "Things will change," she said, "but only if we make them change. Don't ever let anyone treat you as less than you are. You deserve respect, no matter what uniform you wear or what job you do." She looked around at all of them, these women who had watched her endure 7 months of abuse without knowing why. "Remember this night," she told them. "Remember that the person serving your food might be more powerful than the person eating it. Remember that patience and intelligence will always defeat arrogance and cruelty. And remember that justice might take time, but it always comes." The next morning, news of Rashid's arrest was on every major news channel around the world. Billionaire CEO arrested in elaborate FBI sting. The headlines read, "Undercover agent poses as waitress for 7 months to catch international criminal." The story revealed the full extent of Rashid's crimes, which were even worse than what had been revealed in the restaurant. He had stolen over $3 billion through various illegal schemes. He had destroyed dozens of small businesses to eliminate competition. He had bribed officials in 12 different countries. The evidence Olia had gathered was so comprehensive, so undeniable, that Rashid's lawyers advised him to plead guilty. In exchange for a lighter sentence, he was eventually sentenced to 45 years in federal prison and ordered to pay back everything he had stolen. His empire crumbled within weeks. His associates distanced themselves from him. His family disowned him. The man who had thought he was untouchable had lost everything. But the story didn't end with Rashid's arrest. The investigation Olia had conducted revealed an entire network of corruption that stretched across multiple industries and countries. Over the next year, more than 200 people were arrested based on the evidence she had gathered. Billions of dollars that had been stolen were recovered and returned to the people and organizations it had been taken from. Olia received numerous awards and commendations for her work. She was promoted to senior special agent and put in charge of a new task force dedicated to catching white-collar criminals who thought they were above the law. But when asked about the case in interviews, she always emphasized that it wasn't about personal glory. This case was about showing that nobody is above justice, she would say. It doesn't matter how much money you have or how much power you think you wield. If you break the law, if you hurt innocent people, if you think you can treat others as less than human, justice will find you. It might take time, it might require sacrifice, but justice always wins in the end. She also spoke about the importance of respecting everyone, regardless of their job or position in society. The person serving your coffee might be a future CEO. The person cleaning your office might be working their way through medical school. The person you dismiss as beneath you might be the one gathering evidence of your crimes. Treat everyone with respect, not because of what they might be, but because it's the right thing to do. The Golden Palm restaurant changed too after that night. The management implemented new policies to protect their staff from abusive customers. They installed security cameras and panic buttons. They gave their employees the power to refuse service to anyone who treated them disrespectfully. Other restaurants in the city followed suit, creating a wave of change in how service workers were treated. The young waitresses who had worked alongside Aaliyah were inspired by her courage and determination. Several of them went back to school, pursuing careers in law enforcement, law, and business. They carried with them the lesson that Aaliyah had taught them that night. Never let anyone make you feel less than you are, and never underestimate the power of patience and intelligence. One of them, Maria, eventually became a prosecutor specializing in cases involving workplace harassment and discrimination. In her office, she kept a framed photo from that night at the Golden Palm, a reminder of when she learned that heroes don't always wear capes or uniforms. Sometimes they wear aprons and serve food while quietly changing the world. As for the torn shirt that had revealed Olia's identity, it became a symbol of the case. It was displayed in the FBI museum as part of an exhibit on undercover operations. Next to it was a plaque that read, "Sometimes the most powerful revelation comes not from what is hidden, but from what is finally revealed." Special Agent Olia Thompson's 7-month undercover operation proved that justice requires patience, courage, and the willingness to endure hardship for the greater good. Olia herself kept a piece of that shirt in her office, framed alongside her commendations and awards. When young agents asked her for advice, she would point to it and say, "This reminds me that sometimes we have to let ourselves be torn down in order to build something better. Sometimes we have to appear weak, too, reveal our true strength, and sometimes the moment that seems like our lowest point is actually the beginning of our greatest victory." The case also led to significant changes in how financial crimes were investigated. The FBI created new undercover programs, specifically designed to infiltrate the world of white-collar crime. They recruited agents from diverse backgrounds who could blend into different environments. They developed new technologies for gathering evidence without detection. And they learned that sometimes the best way to catch a criminal isn't to chase them, but to let them come to you. Law schools began teaching Olia's case as an example of innovative investigation techniques. Business schools used it as a cautionary tale about the dangers of arrogance and the importance of ethical behavior, and journalism schools analyzed how the story had been reported, examining the intersection of crime, justice, and social issues. 5 years after that night at the Golden Palm, Aaliyah was invited to speak at her old university. The auditorium was packed with students, professors, and members of the community who had heard about her story. She stood at the podium, no longer hiding who she was, no longer pretending to be less than she was. She told them the complete story, from beginning to end, including details that had never been made public. She talked about the nights she had cried in her car after particularly bad shifts. She talked about the times she had wanted to quit when the abuse became almost too much to bear. She talked about how she had kept herself motivated by thinking about all the people Rashid had hurt, all the lives he had destroyed with his greed and cruelty. The hardest part wasn't the abuse, she said. It wasn't the long hours or the constant vigilance. The hardest part was staying silent when every instinct told me to fight back. But I learned that sometimes silence is more powerful than words. Sometimes patience is more effective than action. And sometimes the best way to defeat someone is to let them defeat themselves. She ended her speech with words that would be quoted for years to come that night. When Rashid al-Rashid ripped my shirt and revealed my tattoo, he thought he was showing his power. But what he actually did was reveal his weakness. He showed everyone that he was nothing more than a bully who used his wealth and position to hurt others. And in that moment of revelation, his empire began to fall. The title of my story could have been The Night Everything Changed, but I prefer to think of it as Arab billionaire CEO ripped black waitress's shirt. Her tattoo stunned everyone in the restaurant, because that's exactly what happened. One moment of violence led to a revelation of truth. One act of cruelty led to justice, and one woman's patience led to the downfall of a man who thought he was untouchable. The audience gave her a standing ovation that lasted for 5 minutes. Students lined up to ask her questions, to shake her hand, to tell her how her story had inspired them. Many of them were young women of color who had been told they couldn't achieve their dreams, who had been dismissed and underestimated just like Aaliyah had been. She stayed for hours after her speech, talking to each of them, encouraging them to pursue their goals no matter what obstacles they faced. As she was leaving, a young black woman approached her holding a notebook. "Agent Thompson," she said nervously, "I'm starting the FBI Academy next month. Do you have any advice?" Aaliyah smiled and thought for a moment. "Remember that your greatest strength might be what others see as weakness. Use their underestimation of you as your weapon. Be patient, be smart, and never forget why you're doing this work. Justice isn't just about catching criminals. It's about protecting the innocent and giving voice to the voiceless." The young woman thanked her and walked away, clutching her notebook with determination. Aaliyah watched her go, remembering her own journey from eager recruit to seasoned agent. She thought about all the cases she had worked, all the criminals she had caught, but none had been as meaningful as the night at the Golden Palm. That night had proven something important, not just to the world, but to herself. It had proven that one person with enough determination and courage could bring down an empire. It had proven that justice doesn't discriminate based on wealth or power. And it had proven that sometimes the most ordinary disguise can hide the most extraordinary person. Years later, when Aaliyah retired from the FBI, she wrote a book about her experiences. It became a bestseller, inspiring a new generation of law enforcement officers and activists. Movie studios wanted to turn it into a film, but Aaliyah insisted on maintaining creative control to ensure the story was told accurately and respectfully. The movie, when it was finally made, won multiple awards and brought even more attention to issues of workplace harassment, financial crime, and racial justice. But for Aaliyah, the greatest reward wasn't the fame or the accolades. It was the letters she received from people around the world who had been inspired by her story. Letters from waitresses who had stood up to abusive customers. Letters from whistleblowers who had found the courage to expose corruption. Letters from young people who had decided to pursue careers in justice because of what she had done. One letter in particular stood out. It was from a woman in Saudi Arabia who had worked in one of Rashid's companies. She wrote, "For years, I suffered in silence, afraid to speak out against the injustices I witnessed. When I heard about what you did, how you patiently gathered evidence and brought him to justice, it gave me hope. It showed me that even the most powerful men can fall when faced with the truth. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for showing the world that justice has no nationality, no color, no gender. Justice is universal, and you proved that one person can make a difference." Aaliyah framed that letter and hung it in her home, next to the piece of torn shirt and her FBI commendations. It reminded her every day that her work had mattered, that her sacrifice had been worth it. The story of the Arab billionaire CEO who ripped a black waitress's shirt and discovered she was an FBI agent became legendary. In law enforcement circles, it was taught at the FBI Academy as an example of perfect undercover work. It was cited in legal textbooks as a case study in building evidence. It was discussed in sociology classes as an example of how power dynamics can be disrupted and overturned. But more than that, it became a symbol of hope for people who felt powerless. It showed them that patience could defeat arrogance, that intelligence could overcome strength, and that justice, though sometimes slow, was always possible. The Golden Palm restaurant, which had once been a symbol of exclusivity and privilege, transformed into something different. The new management turned it into a place that celebrated diversity and respect. They hired people from all backgrounds and implemented some of the best worker protection policies in the industry. They even created a scholarship fund for their employees who wanted to pursue higher education, naming it the Aaliyah Thompson Fund for Justice and Equality. Every year on the anniversary of that December night, they held a special dinner where all proceeds went to organizations fighting workplace discrimination and financial crime. Aaliyah always attended these dinners, not as an undercover agent, or even as an honored guest, but as someone who had been part of a moment that changed everything at one of these dinners. 5 years after Rashid's arrest, Aaliyah gave a brief speech. She looked around the room at the diverse crowd of people, from former waitstaff who had become successful professionals to FBI agents who had been inspired by her story. "This place," she said, "was once a symbol of inequality and abuse of power. Now it stands for something different. It stands for the idea that every person deserves respect, that every worker deserves dignity, and that justice doesn't care about your bank account or your connections." That night, when my shirt was ripped and my tattoo was revealed, it wasn't just my identity that was exposed. It was the truth about how power can corrupt and how the powerful often forget that their actions have consequences. She paused, looking at the faces in the crowd, many of them nodding in agreement. But that night also revealed something else. It revealed that those who seem powerless often hold the greatest power of all. The power of truth, the power of patience, and the power of justice. So remember this: When you see injustice, don't look away. When you witness abuse, don't stay silent. And when someone tells you that you're nothing, that you're worthless, that you don't matter, remember that you might be the one person who can bring their empire crashing down. Because in the end, it's not about the title you hold or the uniform you wear. It's about the courage in your heart and the determination in your soul. The room erupted in applause, but Aaliyah wasn't finished. She raised her hand for silence and continued the title of this story. Arab billionaire CEO ripped black waitress's shirt. Her tattoo stunned everyone in the restaurant. Might sound sensational, but it's also deeply true. It captures a moment when assumptions were shattered, when power was challenged, and when justice prevailed. Let it remind us all that we should never judge people by their appearance or their job. The person serving your food might be gathering evidence of your crimes. The person cleaning your office might be documenting your discrimination. The person you dismiss as beneath you might be the one who brings you to justice. As the evening ended and people began to leave, many approached Aaliyah to share their own stories of facing discrimination and finding justice. She listened to each one, offering encouragement and advice. A young man told her how her story had inspired him to report his employer for tax evasion. A woman shared how she had stood up to a customer who had been harassing her for months. Each story was a reminder that change doesn't happen all at once, but through individual acts of courage that add up to something greater. That night, as Aaliyah drove home, she thought about how far she had come from that first day when she had put on the waitress uniform and walked into the Golden Palm. She had endured 7 months of abuse, 7 months of being treated as less than human, 7 months of gathering evidence, one insult at a time. But those 7 months had led to something extraordinary. They had led to justice not just for herself, but for countless others who had been victims of Rashid's crimes. The next morning, Aaliyah received a call from the FBI director. "Thompson," he said, "I have a new assignment for you if you're interested. There's a trafficking ring operating out of high-end hotels. We need someone to go undercover as housekeeping staff." Aaliyah smiled. Another mission, another disguise, another chance to bring justice to those who thought they were untouchable. "When do I start?" she asked. Because Aaliyah Thompson had learned something important from her time at the Golden Palm. She had learned that the most powerful weapon against injustice wasn't a gun or a badge. It was patience, intelligence, and the willingness to appear powerless, in order to gather the power needed to create change. And she was ready to do it all over again, as many times as necessary, until the world became a place where everyone was treated with the respect and dignity they deserved. Looking back on everything that had happened, from that first day as a waitress to the night her shirt was torn to reveal her true identity, Aaliyah realized that every moment had been worth it. Every insult she had endured, every degrading comment she had recorded, every night she had gone home exhausted and discouraged, it had all led to this. It had led to justice, to change, to hope. And as she prepared for her next mission, she carried with her the knowledge that one person really could make a difference. One person with courage, determination, and patience could bring down an empire built on corruption and cruelty. One person could change the world, one case at a time, one criminal at a time, one act of justice at a time. The story of the Arab billionaire CEO who ripped a black waitress's shirt and discovered she was an FBI agent would be told for generations. It would inspire countless others to stand up against injustice, to refuse to be silenced, and to remember that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one everyone else overlooks. And that more than any arrest or conviction, was Aaliyah Thompson's greatest victory. Epilogue: 10 years later, 10 years after that fateful night at the Golden Palm, the world had changed in ways both big and small. The restaurant industry had implemented widespread reforms to protect workers from harassment and abuse. Financial regulations had been strengthened to prevent the kind of money laundering and tax evasion that Rashid had perpetrated. And the FBI had created an entire division dedicated to long-term undercover operations targeting white-collar crime. Nicknamed the Thompson Unit in honor of Olia's groundbreaking work. Olia herself had risen to become deputy director of the FBI, one of the highest-ranking black women in the agency's history. But she never forgot where she came from or the lessons she had learned during those 7 months as a waitress. In her office, prominently displayed, was a framed piece of the torn shirt from that December night, along with a photo of her standing in the Golden Palm in her waitress uniform. Visitors often asked about these items, and Aaliyah would tell them the story, always ending with the same message: never underestimate anyone based on their appearance or position. The person you overlook today might be the one writing your arrest warrant tomorrow. Treat everyone with respect, not because you have to, but because it's the right thing to do. And remember that justice doesn't always come quickly or icily, but it always comes to those who are patient and persistent enough to pursue it. The story had become more than just a case file or a newspaper headline. It had become a reminder that in a world often divided by wealth, race, and power, justice could still prevail. It proved that one person's courage could inspire thousands, that one moment of truth could shatter years of lies, and that sometimes the most powerful revelation comes not from what we hide, but from what we finally choose to reveal. And so the story of how an Arab billionaire CEO ripped a black waitress's shirt, only to discover her tattoo that stunned everyone in the restaurant, lived on not as an ending, but as a beginning of change, of hope, and of the eternal truth that justice, no matter how long it takes or how difficult the path, will always find a way to prevail in the end. Rashid al-Rashid served his full sentence, during which time he had plenty of opportunity to reflect on how his arrogance and cruelty had led to his downfall. Aaliyah Thompson continued her work, taking down criminal after criminal, always remembering that the power of justice lay not in force or violence, but in patience, intelligence, and an unwavering commitment to the truth. And the Golden Palm restaurant stood as a monument to transformation, proof that even the most exclusive and discriminatory spaces could become symbols of equality and respect. The title of this story, Arab Billionaire CEO Ripped Black Waitress's Shirt, Her Tattoo Stunned Everyone in the Restaurant, would forever capture that pivotal moment when everything changed, when truth conquered lies, when justice defeated injustice, and when a woman everyone had underestimated proved that she had been the most powerful person in the room all along.